Cape Cod Regional Government Assembly of Delegates. I'll call this meeting to order, and we will begin with a moment of silence to honor our troops who have died in service to our country and all those serving our country in the armed forces. Thank you, and now we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Here. George Bryant. Present. Leo Kukunis. Christopher Kananga.
Here.
Thomas Keys.
Here.
Marcia King. Thomas Lynch.
Here.
Teresa Martin. Here. John Oman. Paul Pilcher.
Here.
Anthony Scalise.
Here.
Fred Schill.
Here.
Charlotte Strebel. Here. Julia Taylor.
Here.
Mr. Speaker, we have 81.41% present and a quorum.
Thank you. I'll now need a motion to approve today's calendar of business.
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved. I hear a second. Moved and seconded. Any discussion on that? Additions or corrections? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we'll now need a motion to approve the Journal of July 24, 2010, which you all should have received in one form or another. Are there any additions or corrections to the Journal? If not,
Mr. Speaker, move the approval of the Journal of July 21st, 2010 as submitted.
have a second? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, we now move to the communications to the Board of Regional Commissioners, and I see we have one. So, Mrs. Chairman, welcome.
Yes, thank you very much. Nice to be here. There will be another commissioner along shortly. Let's see. We had a very interesting meeting today and a lot of good information. I want to tell you to start off with next Tuesday, August 12th, there'll be an all things transportation sort of a meeting, not a rally, but a meeting at the Cape Cod Commission from 1:30 to 4:30. So if you're in the area and you can stop by Tuesday afternoon, that might be a good thing to do. Today, the commissioners have been very much aware of the concerns of some of the boards of selectmen in some of the towns about the issue of the MEP data analysis for wastewater. Brian Howes, Dr. Howes, is who headed up that group. And we have received communication, as you probably know, from some of the selectmen requesting that that the county would support a review of that data by the National Academy of Sciences. And we gave thoughtful and serious consideration to the request from Orleans, because we heard from them first. And since then, there were other towns like Bourne and Chatham and Sandwich. I'm looking around to see. I don't remember what all the towns were. And we said, no, we didn't think that that was something that we wanted to do, that this data is really a tool. It's a guide. It's not anything set in stone. Those nitrogen numbers will change over time. If a development occurred within that particular watershed, within a couple of years, the data wouldn't be the same. But it was really a guide to help towns to determine what their wastewater review plan would be. So, but then as other towns, as I mentioned, have added their say to the issue, we talked with Sandy Gottlieb today, and we decided that we would support the Wastewater Collaborative developing a symposium on these issues and bring in experts, not only from the Cape but across the country, on nutrient management and on nitrogen and on data, and looking at the MEP data as well. So we decided that we would support them in putting together a symposium for sometime in the fall, so that communities or boards of selectmen or DPW directors or whomever interested in attending a symposium like that where they would do a review of the MEP data and maybe critique it and perhaps, I don't know. We don't have the whole agenda yet, so I don't want to go into details. But we did agree that we would support a symposium sometime in the fall.
There was one element, though, that said that after the symposium had been completed, that we would have an evaluation based upon the information that had been collected as, as part of that process. And again, as far as the specific details, we are waiting for a proposal from Andrew to take a look at that. But the date that we're looking at is to try to get it completed in the early fall so that it isn't hanging out there.
Any questions about that?
Yes. It sounds to me, thank you. It sounds to me as though at first you decided that you weren't going to have a review, and now you've decided like you are going to have a review, and something in the interim must have changed your mind, and I'd like to know if you could tell us what that is.
Well, I think the original request was for the National Academy of Sciences and to try to find funding for that type of a study would be rather prohibitive. Some of the towns indicated, I think it was Orleans, that they would attempt to, through Congressman Delahunt, to see if federal funds might be available for that. But then as we look at it and we hear or read the concerns from other communities, it's the issue will not go away. And the issue of concern about the data is not going to go away. And now the peer review piece, Dr. Howes will tell you that there was peer review all along the way as he and UMass developed this whole protocol. So there was peer review. And he has concerns from a proprietary point of view about just opening that up to just anyone to look at all the calculations or whatever. If someone could take that and actually make it their own and market it and all of that. So I think he has some reasonable concerns. But we're not really sure what the town's concerns are, and we want to look at the data. We don't know if it's really correct. And that's why I made the statement that it's a tool, it's a guide. It's not, this is what you have to follow. This is to guide you in the development of your plan. And the other thing is, it isn't so much the percent nitrogen that you have to be so concerned about. It's the tons of nitrogen, the actual amount of the nitrogen. So a percentage is one factor, but the actual tonnage of nitrogen is something else. So anyway, to really answer your question, so we decided that when you look at public outreach, which is so important in projects like this, that if there are a reasonable number of people who have a concern, you don't want to just push it off to the side. You want to see if you can't do something that might help address it. Because if we don't address it now, we're only going to have to address it later. It's not something that's going to go away.
I guess my concern is if the towns are concerned about the data, it doesn't really matter whether they're a tool or something else. If the data is inaccurate, then it's not very useful as a tool. So I mean, I understand what you're saying, that distinction, but it seems to me that if we're concerned about the reliability of some of the data, which sounds to me like I believe that is some of the concerns of the towns, then I'm applauding the idea of moving forward with more review, because this is clearly the most expensive undertaking that Cape Cod has ever faced and hopefully will face in the future.
Absolutely, and well taken. I might say, too, that the Falmouth Wastewater Comprehensive Review Committee is having a charrette this Saturday morning at 9:30 at the main library, or the public library in Falmouth. And Dr. House, there will be a panel of people. I think it's about 6 individuals, Brian House being one. And they're going to look at alternatives. They're going to explore. They're not really looking at the data, but they're going to be looking at how can we really assess some of the alternatives to the big pipe that are out there that we can maybe rely on in some way or utilize in our plan. So if anybody, it's open to the public, so if anyone's interested, that seems to be the big issue. We can't sewer the whole Cape. Even parts of the towns don't need to be sewered. If we're going to use alternatives, what are the best alternatives to use, and where's the information on those? So I think it should be a pretty interesting charrette.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any other, Charlotte?
Yeah. When is it and where is it?
It's 9:30 a.m. this Saturday, August 7th, at the Falmouth Public Library, the main library on Main Street. I can't remember what room, and I can't remember all the people that are on the panel. But I think it should be a very interesting discussion.
Tom, question?
In your symposium that you're putting together, will there be an explanation of the peer review and the vetting of the information that went along? Because I've heard others say, why do we need the review if it was vetted all along? And one would want to know what the impartiality of, and who did that, who did the review. Is that going to be part of the presentation?
We agreed this morning to have Andrew begin to plan this and to come back with us in 2 to 3 weeks and give us
September,
by the 1st of September to let us know exactly what was going to be planned. So we don't know that yet. Right now, we've just agreed that a symposium is a good idea and that looking at the MEP data is a good idea, but how that is going to get put together, he has to develop that because he wasn't. This was just to get our endorsement of having such a symposium, but without any detail. So we won't have that, but we can communicate it when we do.
And then secondarily, I would think that one of the key components you would probably want to look at is the margin of error that's there within the formulas and within the data, because it matters a lot in terms of when you're making planning decisions about doing big pipes or doing alternative sites or whatever. You want to know what that margin of error is, and I've heard some say that that's something they've been concerned about.
Right.
And I'm sure Andrew is probably well aware of that.
Yes, I'm sure. The other area that for a lot of towns is really important is discharge sites. Even if you have, if you utilize alternatives, if they're decentralized alternatives, how is the discharge handled? And if it's a big pipe, then where are the discharge areas? And then you have the issue, of carbon. There's all kinds of issues that are bigger, I think, than the data, because finding a discharge site I can only speak for Falmouth because I'm far more familiar with that. Finding a discharge site is a huge problem. It can't be in a zone of contribution to a water protected area or a zone 2 at all. It can't be in a zone 2. So anyway, so there are a lot of things that have to be looked at. And in line with that, I might say that the Cape Cod Commission is funding a nutrient management watershed shared cost project among 5 towns. It's Papaneset Bay, which includes Barnstable, Sandwich, and Mashpee, and East Wacoit Bay, which includes Mashpee, Sandwich, and Falmouth. And so they are funding this look-see at if this is a shared watershed and nitrogen management plans have to occur, and then how will the community share the cost of this? So I thought that was a pretty good project on nutrient management that you all would like to know, since some of you represent those towns.
Mary Pat,
Yes.
I'm pretty familiar with this issue. The data that Brian Howes created has to do with the model which predicts the amount of nitrogen that's produced in a watershed by the houses that are there. Simultaneously to that, the actual watersheds themselves are tested. So in other words, they don't say, well, we think X amount of nitrogen is going into the mill pond. They actually go down there and they check the mill pond. So, and during this whole process, the state changed their their formula as to how much each house produced. And so there was some changes in the figures. Chatham went through this, and they said, yes, there is some debate over the modeling, but it wasn't, at the end of the day, it didn't really affect the predictions of nitrogen loading, and it didn't affect any of the decisions. So I think we have to be careful that we're kind of sidetracked on these debates, but everybody says, well, this is, people say, oh, this is a significant thing, maybe we won't have to spend any money. Well, just because they say that doesn't mean it is. In other words, you have to not only show that there's an argument over the data, you have to show that that argument actually is substantive enough that it's going to affect the conclusions and the solutions. So I'm a little skeptical of a lot of this. I know also at the same time, I know Andrew Gottlieb is quoted in the paper saying he anticipates that a suit might come down from the Conservation Law Foundation encouraging some of the towns to basically get moving. They're claiming that we're dragging our feet. So there's a resistance by those who rightly, as Tom says, feel this is a big expensive project, and those who say, hey, this is you're just throwing things in the way to try to stop it. And it doesn't seem to be getting better. It only gets worse. But fortunately for Chatham, we were already in the process when this came up.
Right.
And so we were, the people who, my understanding is, I wasn't there, but the Chatham Board of Selectmen voted not to contribute to this study.
Right.
And the reason is that they were asked not only to contribute to the study, but to stop everything until it came down, and we weren't ready to do that. So
Yeah.
it's a complicated issue, and I don't envy the commissioners and Mr. Gottlieb on that issue.
Well, we'll really have to see what can be included in this symposium, what's truly relevant. And anyway, but we'll have more to say about that as the process moves forward.
Marcia?
Good afternoon. How did the finances end for last fiscal year? Remember, you had a $400,000 increase in June, and I never really got an answer about how is that coming out for the whole year. It's now August. Do we have any numbers that were last fiscal year?
Mark Zielinski will be prepared to do that, but he's on vacation last week and this week. So I think that won't occur until he's back.
So is he going to come to the next meeting, you think? Do you know?
Next week?
Are we going down to?
But I'm sure he's invited.
Oh, yeah, no, that's not next week, it's the week after. The Nauset meeting is...
2 weeks, and our next meeting is at the beach. So
Right.
Okay.
Oh, your next
our
meeting
next
is at the
meeting,
beach,
I
right,
apologize.
yes.
Our next meeting is at the beach.
Yeah.
Would Mark be there, or at least would you be able to discuss?
Well, I think that when we go down there, and I know that this is something that's close to your heart, and you'll ask it again, so our best bet is to have some figures for you, wouldn't it? Okay, we'll tell you what we know, if he doesn't come down.
Okay, is there anything else?
Well, I just wanted to mention about the article that was in the Cape Cod Times today. You probably have heard that Senator Murray had filed a bill relative to economic development, to this, particularly related to all the state agencies that have some role in overseeing certain projects or permitting or whatever. Anyway, through what she has done, apparently, it was to try to combine them so that people who are interested in either getting permitted for a business or pursuing some other areas for funding or whatever it might be, that they would have one agency to access. And then there was a quote from Wendy Northcross about the fact that the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce and our EDC would be working together to comply with the reporting requirements, which is really a good thing, because half the time the state doesn't really know what's going on in the regions. And so to have some designated agency or agencies in a region complete and file those reports, I think is a good thing. But it doesn't in any way relieve or take away local control over projects. So, just because some questions were asked about that. And on the solid waste analysis that's been going on, if any of you are interested in trash, or solid waste, rather. As you know, the Cape Cod Commission has been working with 14 towns. Usually the 15th town that doesn't participate is Falmouth, but in this case it's Bourne. And it's a logical non-participant because they have their own transfer station up there. So I think they'll be ready to come forth with some recommendations pretty soon for all the towns. The idea is to, based on all of the meetings that they have had, is that the consensus is from the 14 towns that in order to reduce the cost and make trash an asset rather than a liability, is to maybe either to create a district or to have a joint contract where all the towns on the Cape could have the same contract, which would then reduce the cost. Because in 2015, everybody's CMAS contract is going to end, and this nice $38 a ton that we've been paying would probably increase to $78 or $80 a ton. So we really need to look ahead and see how we can work together regionally to keep those costs down. So that project is moving forward, and we should hear something more specific in the next couple of weeks. Would you say that's about right?
Yeah, actually, they're expecting to have the RFP is supposed to be returned for evaluation within the next couple of days. It would be for, I guess, a law firm to do the contract management and negotiation. So we should see that shortly once it goes through our procurement vetting, and that will move forward.
That's it. Do you have anything else?
Did you get a copy of the report that I sent out? Did anybody get the? Okay. I went to the National Association of County Officials, and I sent a copy to. Did that get distributed?
It was emailed out.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So if you had any questions on that, I'd have that. I had the opportunity to go to a session that was chaired by Tommy Cahere, that the Department of Transportation came down and talked to, express, this, I guess they spent a day or so sort of wandering around the Cape about how they're going to address all of the problems, congestion management, things like that. And they were listening and said that they'd come back again, and actually made some promises that they would try to do something to improve things. I pointed out for us that what they really need to do is understand that it has to be an integration of land, sea, and air transport. That all the talk about rail beds, because Tom Keyes was kind enough to share this with me, is that we can't rely upon just rebuilding the rail beds in order to use that as a solution, because many of the rail beds go through wetlands and areas that would be disturbed. So I suggested that they look at technology that might be available that wouldn't impose on rail beds, perhaps hover technology, in some cases, monorails, but in even with the monorails, you have to figure some way of providing, an adequate foundation for it. But in any case, there has to be a collaboration among the land, air, and sea transport to get people here. There is continuing to be scheduling problems to get people off Cape. There doesn't seem to be as much of a problem getting on. It's like getting on an airplane. They can load you up pretty fast, but when you try to get off with all your baggage, it sort of takes about 20 minutes, and you might miss a connection because of it, and that seems to be what's happening. It seems to be a question that we have to make some decisions. There was some recommendation about in integrating the business community for offering some type of extended stay promotion, changing the days that, that you change cottages, on the weekends. We pointed out that those decisions have to be made well in advance of the time, and you also have to get a lot of buy-in from people who are trying to, rent their cottages out. So anyway, those are all things that were at least beginning to be addressed. They had people from P&B, from Coastal, and was it Kennedy's outfit for the trains. They had Cape Air, and they had the Steamship Authority. So all of the local actors were there. So I thought it was a pretty good program. And that's about it.
I just have one more thing, and that's the Cooperative Extension annual tour is next Wednesday. And the bus leaves from the county at 8:30 sharp. So it won't wait. So if you want to go on the bus, be there. If you don't go on the bus, all you need to do is go to the Barnstable County Fairgrounds over in Falmouth, Mashpee, I forget which town, over Falmouth, but Mashpee has a piece of it. Be there, and then the tour can go from there. It'll be videographed this time, which I think is kind of a neat idea, so that we can have it, and then people can see it if they're not able to make it, but I hope you can make it.
Tell them what time they're going to be.
8:30,
Or what time it's filmed.
9 o'clock at the fairgrounds, if you're driving yourself.
Okay. Is there any other questions for the commissioners? Well, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any communications from public officials? Any communications from members of the public? Okay, we will now convene the assembly, and we'll start with reports from committees. Have any committees met since the last time? Yes. Julia.
The Human Services Committee met today, and Beth Albert and some representative members of the Barnstable County Human Services Council came. Their topic was to review with us, and then for us to review with you, the history of the council as a group that really was trying to coordinate all the human service agencies on the Cape to be able to work together, and particularly in regard to, from our point of view, to set priorities for problems and possible funding from the county towards those problems. So that was a nice review. Then we got to the meat of the matter, which was their being upset last year during the budget hearing, the vote on the budget, when, remember, Diane Casey Lee came, talked about her problems with the shortfall. Marcia volunteers to an amendment for 11. We had some disagreement about what the amount was, but we'll say 11,000. I thought it was 25, but 11.5. Okay, 11.5. And then that vote. And so they were unhappy about that because they felt that we were there for not understanding the priority, and they didn't want to have to get back into the habit, and nor did I think we want them to, where 200 people show up to plead their case at the last minute. So I said, well, I understood that. I thought that there was perhaps some members, like Paul, felt that maybe he hadn't quite understood their role of the advisory council and the priority issue. But I said, look, this is political, and you don't like the way some people vote. You have to explain your position to them and lobby them. And so it's nice to educate people, but you might need to go a step further if you really feel strongly about this. It was clear they really felt strongly about it. And so we had we won't get into teeny little problems between the guy from the Council of Churches and the rest of them, but we got past that. And I said that I didn't think anyone in the Assembly wanted to go back to the old way of completely random decision-making, and that we appreciated their work in setting priorities, and that if they wanted to push that even further, they would need to continue to inform the members, especially new members and other members, they'd need to lobby on the importance of their setting these priorities. So we left on fairly good. But the last thing, which was something Diane had mentioned to me, she feels that in the future, because of the new open meeting regulations, and I did bring this up, if something wasn't in the budget on the day of the budget hearing, or it wasn't on any other agenda, it probably would have meant that that amendment wouldn't have been in order. So whereas if there was some money for the Council of Churches in the budget, there could be an amendment to increase it. If for some reason their budget request was on the agenda, then it could have been considered. But that Diane's opinion was that that particular motion now wouldn't be allowed under the open meeting law. So that's something we probably can't decide right now, but it's interesting, and it may be the case. And you had sort of hinted at that at the discussion. So it's an interesting topic that we've.
Well, just a second, if we had the county council in here last session, and he discussed it, and the question is that you have to make the public aware, but you can make the public aware of a range of discussions. In other words, you have today we're going to talk about human services, tomorrow we're going to talk about this. So the question is, if you put the budget on the agenda, is everything within that budget then open for discussion, or whether only the specific items? Now, Diane seems to think that if it's not in the budget, you can't discuss it, but I'm not too sure about that. I think
don't know.
I think that lends itself to a wider range of discussions. The other issue that I was here for part of this is that even though the members of the Human Service Advisory Council have agreed among themselves not to bring any requests, not to have individual requests, they can't bind the assembly. In other words, we haven't said that, and we could agree. We could have an ordinance to say we will not entertain individual requests, but that brings up the issue as whether this assembly can bind future assemblies by ordinance. So it's a little complicated, and I think we're going to have to discuss this as to what the procedure is in the future.
Well, my best advice is, you feel strongly about something, you have to let people know in advance.
Okay.
Mr. Speaker?
Yes?
No, I was going to say, that's fine, except for, I didn't know that until that day. And I had said to Diane afterwards, please let me know. I mean, I guess, have we got a legal ruling? I mean, I know Diane says that, but I mean, again, we're always back to has someone called Bob Troy and asked him that question?
Yeah, we will need to do that.
I'm deeply concerned about that,
Yeah.
that you're telling, he said that that's a questionable issue about bringing amendments on during budget season. That's
Questionable about what?
you were saying, he said that having to do with the open meeting law.
Is it a?
Diane said that the issue is, well, excuse me, the issue is, can you broach a subject that's not on the agenda? And my answer is, well, the budget is on the agenda, so therefore anything within the budget may, but we don't know that for fact. If there's any ambiguity, we should get an opinion from county council.
Well, right, and I hope we are, because, I mean, these things happen as people who've been here for a while know that you can have budget issues that crop up, and this year was a perfect example of one, so, thank you.
Okay, Paul?
I guess I read pretty carefully, I wasn't here, but I read the transcript of Attorney Troy's session here, and I guess I would be very wary of the ability of the Assembly to entertain a motion to change the budget if that proposal had not been on the agenda, because that has the effect of ambushing the people who are, say, from the Human Advisory Council, with all of a sudden some change in the budget allocation being made that they had no opportunity to prepare for or to know that was going to take place. So I hope that specific question gets asked of Attorney Troy, because my reading of his opinion was that we can't do that.
All right, well, obviously, I've heard that there's a problem, so I'm going to request that the clerk ask that very question to Attorney Troy, and we'll get back. Fred?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, there was, there were a number of other, this was a fairly long discussion with the advisory council. And it was a surprise to me that there was, that the advisory council was very upset as a group about the action that the delegates took, the assembly took. They were also very upset by the person who came in, who was on the council, and made this suggestion or talked about the need for having this money. And they also went through with us the ordinance that the advisory council was formed and what the reason why that advisory council was put together, the directive and the recommendations of what they are supposed to be doing. So what we did was, what the Assembly did in voting this issue, usurped the basis for what the advisory council is supposed to be doing, and does. And I think it was, we talked a little bit at the end of the meeting about how this might not happen in the future. And one possibility, and I think they decided this was a good idea, to have a couple of meetings a year with the Assembly. Also to have some people from the advisory council present at a number of the budget hearings, even though theoretically they have been told that there is no money coming from the county to them. What they had been told in the past, which is why they didn't bring any bill in front of us for having money given to them. It seems like maybe there is a possibility of getting money for various programs. So, as happened this past budget season. So I think we encouraged them, as our committee encouraged them to come to the budget hearings. And if there are, in this case, it was presented to us as kind of an emergency issue that maybe there are ways through the budget process that money could be found, as it was this year. So.
Okay. Do you have Chris, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was here for most of the discussion, and I think what I would say is I still don't understand exactly what organization on the advisory council was adversely affected by what we did, because I would say that none of them were. Secondly, there's words being used like ambush and usurp and abuse of process that I just have to say I disagree with. And it was also mentioned that there was, maybe people didn't know what they were doing, or political reasons. And I just want to go on the record as saying that that's the furthest from my mind. So.
Okay. Julia, back to you.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't use the word ambush, or I thought it was she just came reporting something. Marcia felt, oh, there's an emergency, and she brought it forward. What the advisory council's issue, I think, is simply they prefer, and whether they can have their way, so far they can't, but they just wanted to express their very strong preference for being the people that set the priorities. They really weren't angry that either the Council of Churches had done what they did or that we'd done what we did, but they feel very strongly, obviously, and that's why they came, that they want to be the group that sets that priority. And I think some of us will think, yes, that's convenient, and some won't. So that's what I mean by it's political. you have political differences of opinion about that kind of thing. We've always had those differences over whether there should be a council, even from the beginning, and so how strong that role should be is a political decision. It's not a moral issue, it's a political issue. So my advice to them was, it's a political issue, you've got to try and lobby people for your position. Simple as that.
Well, anyway, the lobbying was done on both sides, and if I remember, it passed by majority vote. I don't know who voted. I don't even remember who voted. I remember how I voted, but I have no idea how anybody else voted. But Tom?
I just want to visit Paul's statement a little bit, because just to say from my position as a member of this legislative body, I believe it is my, and I think each individual's duty and responsibility through the budgetary process to be prepared to offer an amendment or to support any amendment that someone else might offer right at the time of the budget. After, and with the opportunity to debate that openly, with the opportunity to vote it up or down, and to win or lose. We have a very, I think, thorough budgetary process that allows groups for input, that allows us to hear from citizens at the committee level. We then bring everyone before the Finance Committee with the individual committees, and we have a hearing again on the budget with the Finance Committee. Committee heads sitting around on that also. But still, at the bottom, at the end of the day, the responsibility rests with us to vote it up or down, and we can add or subtract to it. I think the one policy that I think we've been very responsible about is that if you're going to add something, you need to subtract something. There are a lot of budgetary legislative bodies that just add. No, the money will be there. The commissioners will find the money. We're just adding. We kind of accept a bottom line, but we don't have to. You could add $1 million this budget and send it on, and if they sign it, then they'll find a way to fund it. So I'm philosophically, I want that, ability to do that. I understand the individual issue they're bringing up, and I supported the creation of the Needs Advisory Council when it came about. I like the idea that they'll set priorities. But at the end of the day, I have to represent the people of my town, as each of you do, and if you offer something, you have that total right to do, and I would support that 100%. Right.
Yeah, well, first Marcia, and then I'll get to Paul.
Thank you,
He was waving. Oh, okay.
And I agree with what Julia said, and I guess I'm shocked, Fred, that you even said, and exactly what you said was, this group thought that they were the ones who were getting money, and this is why I was one of the two who didn't vote for the advisory. Not that I didn't think it was a good idea. I knew that this was going to happen. The minute you set up a group, they now think that they're going to get the money. So they don't want 15 of us making those decisions. They want to make the decision. And right, to use the word usurp or whatever, that's the problem. Now, if any of them had come forward with anything and had said basically what Diane had said, they would have risen or fallen on this group based on how everybody supported them. But a majority of the people supported them. So I guess I do take a bit of an umbrage because I know they're angry, but they're angry because the reason is, as Julia said, is all political. And they want to control the money. This has always been an issue of money since it first was created. And at some point, we're not going to have surpluses, and we didn't have a surplus. We took it, as Tom said, we took it from something else. So we didn't have extra money just hanging around. Everyone made a conscious decision. But I'm sorry to hear that they took it out on Diane, and that was such a heated meeting, which I'm getting that it is. And that's too bad, because I think that there are some people on this panel, new and old, and maybe next year, will kind of have to think about what has just transpired today at that meeting, from what I'm hearing, and realize that, that these are certain issues that have to be dealt with. And we are the elected officials. They're not. I think that they made a couple of suggestions over the last couple of years that the commissioners did not choose to abide by. Their idea is advisory. They can set an idea, but for them to come back and say, well, we weren't going to get any money, so we didn't give you any idea, that's, again, they're focusing on the money. They're not focusing on giving me every year, this is the plan they'd like to to solve homelessness, solve hunger, and let's try to figure out how to do it, they want the money. And so I do take personal umbrage to that. I thought Diane, has done a fabulous job. I would have given the same respect and support to other groups if they'd shown up if I had known who they were. Diane has been in front of us many times and has been vetted by this panel repeatedly. So I think that, I'm sorry that she's taking any brunt for getting the 11.5, and it is only 11.5, but I think she did a great job.
I have a feeling we're going to get some comments on this, but I'll start with Paul, and then I'll move to the... Paul.
Excuse me, I just wanted to be clear that I was not necessarily expressing my personal preference as to how the budget process needs to work. I am saying that it appears to me, and I would like to have this clarified, that if we are having a meeting where it says consideration of the budget, and somebody is going to offer specific budget amendments for increasing a particular line that affects a particular agency or so forth, I'm not sure that we can do that without having that noticed and put in the agenda. Now, I would like to have that question answered. It's not a question of my personal preference. It was a question of my reading the opinion of Attorney Troy from the last meeting.
Well, we'll get that, but George, and then I'll go down the line here.
I was at the advisory council meeting when one person on the advisory council criticized the Assembly's actions. And I was, of course, here when Diane Casey came in. But it was only one person who criticized it. Now, today there were about 8 people, I think, who came in from the advisory council. My feeling is that it's a fairly minor thing, and it can be corrected in the future, and it's not something that we're talking about. I think it was $11,500. I've always had great respect for the Cape Cod Council of Churches, and Diane represents them because they were around when nobody else was around. I remember them from the 60s and 70s doing a lot of good things in individual towns in the Cape. So when she came in and said she could use the money, that was a great idea, and I still do.
Okay.
I'd like to mention that the Advisory Council will not meet this month. They usually do not meet in August, but we will be meeting again on the 23rd of September. That'll be the following meeting. There was no meeting last month because the Director of Human Services here was moving her house from one place to another, and so the meeting was canceled.
Okay. Do you guys, Fred, you want to?
Thank you. No, I think that there is a fundamental point to be made, and that is one of fairness and straightforwardness. There are hundreds of groups represented under the Advisory Council and represented by these various groups. There's a list here of probably about 30, which are actually made up of many other groups. Those groups were told that Barnstable County was not going to provide any money to them. They were told that. So that all of those hundreds of people, thousands of people, didn't come in the room during the budget hearings, didn't come in the room when we were having our vote, because they were told not to come, that there was nothing that was going to happen. And in fact, I remember at various times over the last 6 years when we've talked about bringing up something at the last minute, that I was told that unless you have it vetted through the Finance Committee, it can't happen. And so I think that there was a reversal of that procedure, of that policy. And I think it's perfectly fine that $11,500 went to the Council on Churches for that issue. I don't think that's the point. I think the point is that we set up a way of doing something in the past. We had we have an ordinance in place that sets up the advisory panel to do this very thing, and we went in a different direction. And I think that's it. I think it sets, I think next year, which I won't be here, I wish I were, but I'm not, but next year, I think you may find that there might be 1,000 people in these meetings to try and get some money as a result of what we did this year.
Okay, Tony?
I was at that meeting today, and I think what you're saying, Fred, there's a little bit of truth to it, but the fact of the matter is we didn't change the process. We all got caught by surprise. The most surprised person in the room was that young lady, was Diane, when she got the money. She didn't come here looking for money. She didn't ask us for money. If I remember correctly, and I'm sure some of you have better memories than I do, she came in to discuss the process so that in the next budget season, she would know how to approach getting the money that she needed. When Marcia made the motion to give the money to the council of churches, and then we, as a collective group, discussed it, argued it, whatever. Everybody said what they had to say, and then voted in favor of giving her the money. She was, in fact, the most surprised person in this room. And when she went back to the council of churches, and Tom was here, and I don't remember his last name. He was as surprised as Diane was that they got the money. And Tom mentioned at this meeting, and maybe I heard it wrong, that at least it seemed to me that they were giving Diane a hard time about coming here asking for money, and she did not ask for money, if I remember correctly. In fact, I think Tom Lynch was the first one to talk to her about the process that she should follow at the next budget season. So I don't think she didn't come in here and we didn't change the process. We made a motion, our motion was made, we discussed it, and we voted on it, and we gave her the money. And I was happy to do it. And as George said, there was a different cast of characters than normal, and obviously I was one of them, but I voted in favor of it, and I would vote in favor of it again, if it happened again in that situation. Yeah, so maybe today's meeting brought to light for that whole group that they have to come together. It can't just be one person or two people. They should all come in. It'd be nice to have 10 people at our meetings when we're doing our budgets and doing the public hearings. But I don't think we did anything wrong, and I would have done, if it was to happen today, I would have done the same exact thing. Mm-hmm. But again, she was the most surprised person in the room, and I was happy for her.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I would urge those of you who get your journals electronically to go back and to check the journal of that meeting. I don't know, I think it was probably in June, because it was my understanding, and I don't have a perfect memory either, that she was under some time constraints. We talked about, she said we was running out of money at that point, and she needed a certain amount to get through the next few months. That was what I understood. But we can check the journal. Really, since the vote has been taken and passed, I understand Fred's concerns, but I also have to agree with George. At the end of the day, it's $11,000. This too shall pass, as they say, and we'll join this debate again in a few months with a different cast of characters, who knows how many, but I hope that it doesn't. I mean, I respect the role of the council, and I respect the role of Beth Albert. I think they've done a terrific job. This is just a little blip. We'll get through it, I hope, and without any too many hard feelings. So, we want to get any further? Okay. Is there any other committee meetings? Okay, hearing none. I'm going to ask if there's a report from the clerk. Diane is not here, but Jenny, do you have anything to add? You heard Mary Pat talk about the tour of the county facilities next week, so you're aware of that. You're also aware that we're going to meet at the beach. If some of you can't make it, too bad, but I'll be there. So there'll be more fry clams for me. So John isn't here, but I'll thank him in absentia for his invitation. Is there any other business to be brought before the delegates? Hearing none? Yes, Tom?
Move to adjourn.
Okay, been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, we're done.